President Trump ordered tough new tariffs on America's top three trading partners, China, Mexico, and Canada. Its northern neighbor was hit with a 25% tariff on all exports to the U.S., except for a lower 10% rate on energy and oil. Hours later, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responded with a 25% levy on many American goods, solemnly saying, quote, "We didn't ask for this," unquote. Joining me now is Chrystia Freeland. She served as Canada's Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister under Trudeau until she resigned in December. Her move helped bring down Trudeau's premiership. She's now one of the frontrunners to replace him in upcoming party elections. Chrystia Freeland, pleasure to have you on. So Donald Trump says, thank you. Donald Trump says that the reason he's doing this is, the ask, and this is the justification, is the fentanyl trade, the fentanyl that is coming in from Canada and Mexico. The bizarre part about this is not a lot of fentanyl comes into the United States from Canada. I mean, I think the latest numbers we have, it's 43 pounds coming out of Canada and 21,000 pounds coming out of Mexico. So what you've negotiated with Donald Trump before over the NAFTA renewal renegotiation. Why is he doing this to Canada? What is the motivation? It can't really be fentanyl.
You're absolutely right, Fareed. The pretexts are utterly ludicrous. This action is utter madness. It is a betrayal of America's closest friend, of your ally, your neighbor, your best partner in the whole world. It is an act of economic warfare. And the president was clear just this morning that it is a direct attack on our sovereignty. And I have to tell you, Fareed, Americans are going to be astonished by the Canadian response. We're hurt, for sure, because we're your friends and neighbors. But most of all, we're angry, and we are united and resolute. Canada is the true north, strong and free. We love our country, and we are united. We are strong. We're smart. We're going to fight for our country. We're going to fight for Canada, and we're going to be successful.
So let's put a little bit of substance on that. You're a much smaller economy than the United States. 75% of your exports come to the United States, whereas I think the other way around is like 12%. There's only so much you can do to retaliate with an economy that much larger than yours. So how do you do it in a way that's effective?
Well, first of all, we have more leverage than Americans think. Canada is the largest market for the United States, larger than China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. And we know Americans. We know that for you guys, the customer is always right. We're your biggest customer. Doesn't make a lot of sense to be punching us in the face. The second thing, Fareed, as you know very well, is America's tariffs are self-harming. By putting tariffs on the stuff that Canada sells you, you are going to hurt Americans. You have put a tariff, you're putting a tariff on the oil and gas that we sell you. That is going to make prices at the pump, prices at grocery stores a lot higher. And the final thing, Fareed, is this matters to us so much more than it matters to you. Our very sovereignty is at stake. You are seeing a phenomenal, united and resolute response across Canada. And for Americans, does this really matter to you at all? I mean, do Americans wake up in the morning and say, wow, we got to beat up on those Canadians? I don't think so. I think Americans actually recognize that we are a great partner, a great neighbor, a great friend, that this is ridiculous. It is not worth Americans suffering over this. As the Prime Minister said, we do not want this conflict, but we're not going to give in.
When you look at this situation where the United States is basically levying tariffs on its closest allies, particularly Canada, really its oldest ally, Does it make you think Canada is going to have to make its way in the world and find new markets and new friends? And of course, China, the second largest economy, comes up when one thinks about this?
Fareed, we have so many friends and even family members in the United States. Our preference and our hope is that you guys are going to come to your senses. Our preference and our hope is that we can go back to a win-win North American partnership. I mean, currently our trade should be governed by the USMCA, which we negotiated with President Trump. When we signed that deal, he said it was the best trade deal ever. So what we really want is for all the Americans who are listening to say, what the heck is going on? You mean we're fighting with the Canadians? And to get back to a reasonable, mutually beneficial relationship. That is our preference.
And when you have thought about this thing, you've talked about 100% tariffs on some things. You talked about a boycott of American goods, which would be not a formal legal thing, but you're just urging Canadians to stop buying American goods when they go to grocery stores. Is it also, are you also thinking in your proposals of doing something on oil? You know, we import a lot of oil from Canada.
Fareed, I'm glad you mentioned the boycott because that is already happening across the country. Americans have to understand how hurt and frankly how furious Canadians are. Our sovereignty is being challenged, and so yeah, regular Canadians across the country are coming up with ways to stand for Canada, to fight for Canada, to defend Canada, but mostly to say to our American neighbors, guys, just cut it out. Just stop it. This is a terrible idea. And yes, we are going to use all the tools in our toolbox. You mentioned a little bit earlier how the United States depends on China for critical minerals and metals that you need for semiconductors, that you need to build electric vehicles. Well, guess who also produces those? Canada. You depend on us for a lot, and we are happy to work together, but it's got to be a two-way street.
So you did negotiate with Trump, and so you do have a sense of him. And I'm wondering, you know, what do you think is going on? Because the fentanyl reasoning, you know, is plainly not important. It, you know, Canada, I think, sends 0.002% of the fentanyl that Mexico sends, that passes through Mexico. It's all really coming because of American demand for it. But he then had talked about making Canada the 51st state, which is obviously, again, not going to happen. What is he doing? What, in your view, what is he trying to do?
Look, that is, of course, a question first and foremost for the president. You're totally right, Fareed, that the pretexts for beating up on Canada are totally ludicrous. I think we all do know one thing about President Trump. The one thing he respects is strength, and if he sees weakness, if he smells weakness, he pushes harder and harder and harder. And so what you are going to see, what America is going to see, what the world is going to see from Canada is total strength, total unity, and a very smart surgical strategic approach.
Now, you're an economist of sorts. You have a very distinguished career as a writer on economics. When you look at where we are, you know, a trade war between the United States and its closest ally, possibly the Peterson Institute says that this could produce inflation in the United States on a fairly significant scale. I think they have a chart that shows that it could go up 3–4%. Does that leave you thinking we're entering, you know, a kind of a much less prosperous world? Because, I mean, economics is meant to be about win-win, not win-lose. This almost feels like lose-lose, because both economies, the U.S. and Canada, will be worse off after all this.
Look, you're totally right. The path the U.S. is on right now is a lose-lose path. And at the end of the day, you cannot defy the laws of economics. You're exactly right to say the people who are going to suffer from this the most are Americans, including the Americans who voted for Trump. I mean, the president has decided now to make gas in the United States more expensive. He's decided to make groceries in the United States more expensive. And our retaliation is going to cost Americans jobs. That it's completely ridiculous. We do not want to do this. And the right thing for Americans to do right now is to kind of shake their heads and say, guys, the Canadians actually are great partners. They're great neighbors. Let's not do this, because I want to tell you, Canada is formidable. We are resolute. We are determined. We know what we're fighting for. We don't want to have this fight, but we are not going to lose it.